Some stories are etched not in stone, but in the fragile minds of those who lead. These are the tales that history often overlooks, the internal battles fought in the silent chambers of the heart and mind. They shape not just the individual, but the course of nations. We look back at history and see great figures, monuments to power and reason, testaments to human achievement and the enduring legacy of leadership. We see the grand sweep of events, the rise and fall of empires, the triumphs and tragedies that define an era. But what happens when that reason begins to fracture? When the very foundation upon which these great figures stand begins to crumble? What happens when the mind, the seat of power and judgment, becomes a battleground itself? This is the story of a king, a man burdened by duty, responsibility, and the weight of a nation's expectations. A man born to rule an empire that spanned continents, commanded the seas, and shaped the destiny of millions. George III, a name synonymous with an era, a reign marked by both glory and turmoil. At 22, a young man, barely out of his youth, he ascended the British throne, inheriting a legacy of power and responsibility that would test him in ways he could never have imagined. Determined to be a new kind of monarch, one who would break from the past and forge a new path for the nation. The first Hanoverian born in Britain, he felt a deep connection to the land and its people. He declared, "I glory in the name of Britain," a statement that resonated with a nation eager for a truly British king. He was seen as a symbol, a fresh start of a truly British monarchy, a departure from the perceived foreign influences of his predecessors, a beacon of stability, a promise of continuity in a rapidly changing world. His early reign was marked by duty, a relentless commitment to the responsibilities of his office, devotion to Queen Charlotte, a partnership that provided him with strength and solace, and a love for simple country life, a respite from the pressures of court and the demands of empire. Known as Farmer George, a nickname that reflected his genuine interest in agriculture and rural affairs. He championed agriculture, science, and the arts, believing in the power of knowledge and innovation to improve the lives of his people. He was diligent, moral, and dedicated, a king who took his responsibilities seriously and strived to do what was best for his nation. A king who led Britain to victory in the 7 Years' War, expanding its global influence and solidifying its position as a world power, shaping a global empire, an empire upon which the sun never set. He worked closely with ministers, navigating the complex political landscape of his time, asserting the crown's authority, while also respecting the role of Parliament. For over 2 decades, he seemed the very embodiment of stability and strength. He was the anchor of the British state, a constant presence in a world of change. Yet, even in these early years, there were whispers, subtle hints of a fragility beneath the surface. Brief illnesses, episodes that were quickly dismissed or attributed to the stresses of his position. Moments of agitation, fleeting instances of unease that were soon forgotten in the face of his overall competence. The pressures of the crown are immense, a weight that can crush even the strongest of shoulders. And the loss of the American colonies in 1783, a devastating blow to British pride and power, was a devastating blow, a wound that would fester and deepen over time. The defeat was a public humiliation, a stark reminder of the limits of British power and the fallibility of its leaders, and a private wound, a source of deep personal anguish for the king. Few could have predicted in those moments of apparent stability, the storm gathering within his mind, the tempest that would soon engulf his reason and threaten the very foundations of his reign. A shadow was lengthening, a darkness creeping in, heralding a far more personal and tragic war to come, a battle fought not on distant shores but within the confines of his own mind. The year was 1788, a time of elegance and empire, but beneath the gilded surface, shadows were gathering. The weight of the crown, the pressures of governance, and perhaps something deeper, were about to take their toll. The king, George III, now in his late 40s, a man known for his steadfastness and devotion to duty, began to change. Subtle at first, these shifts in character would soon become alarming. His speech, once measured and deliberate, became a relentless torrent, an unstoppable flow of words that left listeners struggling to keep up. The carefully constructed pronouncements of a monarch were replaced by an outpouring of thoughts, ideas, and anxieties. Hours of rambling, leaping from topic to topic with dizzying speed, a mind seemingly unable to find purchase on any single thought. From matters of state to the most trivial of observations, everything poured forth in an unceasing stream. The pillar of predictability, the very foundation of the monarchy, was now dangerously erratic, threatening to topple the established order. The stability that the kingdom relied upon was fracturing before their very eyes. His moods swung wildly, from moments of intense euphoria, a manic energy that filled the room, then plunging into despair and fits of uncontrollable rage, leaving those around him fearful and bewildered. Violent outbursts shocked the court, shattering the carefully maintained facade of royal decorum. Whispers of concern began to circulate among the courtiers. He even physically attacked his own son, the Prince of Wales, a shocking act of aggression that highlighted the severity of his condition. The royal household was thrown into chaos, the carefully orchestrated routines of palace life disrupted by the king's unpredictable behavior. Physicians were baffled, struggling to understand the nature of the king's affliction. Their traditional remedies proved useless against this unseen enemy. They were watching a king, a symbol of power and stability, lose his grip on reality, slipping further and further away from the world they knew. Physical symptoms began to appear, compounding the growing concern. A hoarse voice, often strained and barely audible, foaming at the mouth, a disturbing and frightening sight. Wild eyes, darting and unfocused, and violent convulsions that shook his body. The king of a vast empire, a global power that stretched across continents, was being broken down, piece by piece, by an invisible enemy, a force that no army could defeat. His family watched in horror, helpless to stop the king's descent into madness. Queen Charlotte, his devoted wife, was heartbroken, witnessing the suffering of the man she loved. His children faced a man they could not recognize, a father transformed into a stranger by the ravages of his illness. The first great episode of the king's madness had begun, casting a long shadow over the throne and the nation. It was a private agony, confined within the walls of the palace, that soon became a public crisis, threatening the stability of the realm. The monarchy and government trembled, uncertain of the future and the king's ability to lead. The stable reign so long enjoyed had ended, replaced by an era of instability and fear. The age of madness had dawned, bringing with it uncertainty and dread. The nation braced for uncertainty as the king's illness threatened to unravel the fabric of society. The king's mind was a runaway train, careening off the rails and heading towards an unknown destination, and no one, not his doctors, his family, or his ministers, could stop it. The storm was only beginning, and the kingdom was about to be swept away by its fury. The king's illness deepened. His thoughts collapsed into chaos. He spoke for hours, mixing state secrets, family gossip, and gibberish. He addressed phantoms, lost in a world of delusion. His behavior grew inappropriate. Foul language, advances toward attendance, strange obsessions. Physical pain tormented him, fueling his mental distress. The court became a theater of the absurd, the government paralyzed. The king's madness was now a constitutional crisis. Who was in charge? The ship of state sailed into a storm without a captain. The king's madness, a dark cloud that had been gathering for some time, found its most haunting and poignant expression. It was a manifestation of inner turmoil, a descent into a world where reality and delusion blurred. This unraveling played out most dramatically in the serene yet imposing gardens of Windsor Castle. The very place that should have offered solace became the stage for his most profound struggles. Often, he would appear, dressed in his nightgown, a stark contrast to the regal figure he once was. This simple attire underscored his vulnerability and detachment from the responsibilities of his crown. He wandered aimlessly among the ancient oaks, trees that had stood for centuries, silent witnesses to the ebb and flow of history. There, under the watchful gaze of these arboreal giants, he engaged in animated conversations, bowing and conversing with the trees as if they were esteemed guests. In his fractured mind, he believed he was speaking to Frederick the Great, the formidable Prussian king, long dead, a figure from the past resurrected in the theater of his imagination. These were not fleeting moments of eccentricity. He held long, detailed discussions, elaborate dialogues filled with questions and pronouncements, as if conducting affairs of state with his silent wooden advisors. He was seeking counsel, earnestly seeking guidance on matters of state from these silent, unyielding sentinels. To observers, those loyal servants and concerned members of the court, it was heartbreaking to witness the ruler of an empire, a man of immense power and responsibility, seeking advice not from his ministers or advisors, but from an oak. The trees in his mind became his subjects, loyal and unwavering, his silent courtiers, a court of nature, unburdened by ambition or deceit. He shook their branches with a certain vigor, as if greeting dignitaries, bestowing honors upon them in his own unique and unsettling way. The natural world, once his solace, a place of refuge and contemplation, tragically became a stage for his madness, a backdrop for his increasingly erratic behavior. The image of the king whispering secrets to an old oak endures in the annals of history, a potent symbol of profound isolation, a monarch adrift in a sea of his own making. In his mind, surrounded by his arboreal confidants, he was not alone. He felt connected, understood, but in reality, stripped of his sanity, he was utterly lost, adrift in a world only he could perceive. The quiet center of his storm, the eye of his personal hurricane, was a kingdom of one, a solitary realm ruled by delusion and despair. 18th century medicine offered little comfort. The king's doctors, led by Dr. Francis Willis, believed in restraint and coercion. He was strapped into chairs, bound in straitjackets, subjected to blistering agents, emetics, and toxic purgatives. The treatments were brutal, meant to subdue, not heal. The king pleaded for mercy, calling his doctors keepers. In lucid moments, he knew the cure was a punishment. The ignorance of the age deepened his trauma. The people meant to help him only worsened his nightmare. The king's madness was a political earthquake. The British Constitution had no answer for a living monarch unable to rule. Prime Minister Pitt's government was paralyzed. No laws could pass. The Prince of Wales, allied with the opposition, saw his chance to become regent. Parliament erupted in a bitter battle over the Regency Bill. Pitt fought to limit the prince's powers, hoping for the king's recovery. The nation watched as the throne stood empty. Just as the bill was about to pass, news came. The king was recovering. His reason returned. The crisis ended as suddenly as it began. The Regency Bill was abandoned. The king resumed his duties, but the shadow of illness lingered. The machinery of state creaked back to life. For now, the king was back in control, but everyone knew the storm could return. The king's recovery in 1789 sparked national celebration. He was hailed as a symbol of resilience, the monarch who returned from darkness. He resumed his duties, met ministers, and delighted the public at Weymouth. The memory of madness faded, replaced by hope. Yet the shadow never left him. He feared relapse. His family and government watched anxiously. Small signs of agitation persisted. The king was on a knife's edge. For over a decade, he remained a patriotic icon as Britain fought Napoleon. But grief and pressure took their toll. Relapses returned, each one leaving less of the old king. The tide of illness was slowly washing him away. In 1810, the death of Princess Amelia broke the king for good. Madness returned, this time without hope of recovery. The Regency Act passed. His son became Prince Regent. The king was confined to Windsor Castle, blind and deaf, a ghost in his own palace. His world shrank to a few rooms, his mind lost in memories and phantoms. He played music for hours, spoke to ghosts, and wandered in isolation. He lived nearly a decade in this state, unaware of the world outside. He died in 1820, after almost 60 years on the throne. The strong monarch was gone, replaced by a broken, forgotten man. His reign ended long before his final breath. King George III's story is a profound human tragedy. He began as a symbol of hope, but history remembers his madness. Modern science suggests porphyria, a rare genetic disorder, may explain his suffering. The treatments he endured likely worsened his agony. He was a victim of his own biology, not a failure of character. His decline is a lesson in the dangers of ignorance and the limits of power. Behind the crown was a man enduring the unendurable. His story is not just of a mad king, but of a human being lost to history. The echo of his tragedy still haunts the corridors of time. In the end, he reminds us of the fragility of power and the human mind.